start of a new year and we have to start somewhere. But where do we start? We are all facing different challenges. We have different goals, unique healing and development for our own self-growth. How can we set ourselves up for the best journey ahead, given everything that has been happening, especially in the last 2 years, having affected us all in some shape or form, large or small? In this episode, let's start here and navigate together to move forward. Welcome back, Soul Tribe. And I'm super excited to have a returning guest from Series 3. Do you guys remember the lovely, beautiful soul, Carla Devine, aka the Soul Coach? We last met and spoke with Carla on soul goals. What a great episode. It was so deep and moving for me. And I know for Carla, but I hope it was for you. And it's such a great episode that if you've missed it, you can still check it out. And I really encourage you to. Well, today we're starting from where we are right now with a view to move forward. And I'm going to be talking to Carla about how we can do that. How can we do that together? What does that mean also for us individually? So who is Carla, for those of you that don't know? Well, she's got that gorgeous, sexy Derry Northern Irish accent, based in Northern Ireland, the soul coach, and specializes in life coaching and holistic well-being for mind, body, and soul. She has a massive passion and purpose in this life to enable people who are soul searching to rediscover and reconnect who they really are so that they can live a life that feels good from the inside out. And that's why I really find this synchronistic alignment and synergy towards Carla. She genuinely comes from a very passionate place, having been on her own journey. You know, whether you're at the start of your soul searching or already on your path of discovery, she can provide inspiration and guidance and suggestions on aligning further to the calling of your soul. So this episode is called Let's Start Here. And we just had the episode last week on the vibration of 2022. And we left that in such a great place to open this episode. And I'm really excited. You know, how can we be true to ourselves? How can we really understand where we are today? And we have to kind of map that, right, Carla? So tell me, what are your thoughts about Let's Start Here? Where should we start?
So I suppose the inspiration behind us choosing the topic, Let's Start Here, is that we have to start somewhere. And we really need to start to reflect, I think, at the outset of where this last 2 years has taken us as individuals and us as a global community as well. So, like you said, I'm a life coach. And this last 2 years, I have been out here in the world supporting people at this time. And for some people, this has been a really difficult time, Steph. For others, it might not have been just as difficult. But I want this conversation to be really inclusive. Because if there are people in need at this time of help and support and how to change or upgrade or manage these uncertain times, I think we need to start at the grassroots of where maybe things are at for people. And obviously, with being a coach, I have spent almost 2 years seeing into people's lives, seeing through their eyes, listening to their experiences, and just really getting to sense and experience their own unique journey at this time. So I just wanted to begin our conversation today just by acknowledging this and just taking a moment to reflect on some of the stories and experiences of this time, and then we'll take the conversation further. So as always, I've just prepared something just to really do my own clients justice, or any conversations that I've had with people when they've shared their experiences with me, both in session and just day to day. I put pen to paper and I just would like to read this out, and we have called it Let's Start Here, if that's okay.
Yes, please. I'd love for you to start with this piece and passage that you've written.
Great. So let's start here. As we enter another year, let's start a conversation about some of the impact that the journey of 2020 and 2021 has had on the collective human race. Let's start here to highlight some of the more hidden impact that this very surreal time has created. Let's start here by opening up a respectful conversation, that the impact far outreaches just hospitals, medical facilities and systems. It's all out here with us, all in our homes, our families, our schools, our communities, and in our jobs. Let's start here to highlight some of the invisible impact that often does not make it onto the so-called newsworthy agendas. Older people living alone in fear and starved of natural human contact and support. Increased incidents of domestic violence, abuse, neglect, addiction and suicides during lockdowns and beyond. Increased anxiety, depression, panic and fear. People dying alone and family and friends traumatised by not being able to touch, say goodbye or attend funerals. Let's not also forget the toll on our nursing and care staff, having to fill the gap for absent family and friends during those precious last moments of someone's life, and all the other key life-changing events where it is only natural to have your nearest and dearest by your side for support. Families not being able to see each other for extended periods of time, or not at all in some cases. And let's not forget our children, our next generation, whose lives and childhood experiences of school, home and play are changed forever, and where fear, control and restriction are now the ingredients of their upbringing and development. Relationships breaking down due to the pressure cooker of stress and disconnection, and the impact and stress put upon our business owners, services, and the economy that is melting into the abyss. So the list could go on and on. But let's start here to highlight that some of the measures and the restrictions of this past 2 years have actually caused major impact and harm to our mental, emotional, physical, spiritual health and well-being. Let's start here, Steph, but let's not stay here. In order to move forward, we must acknowledge and own where we are, and also hold space for where each other is on this journey. So wherever you are at this time, each one of us is having our own personal human experience. So let's start right here, right now, with love and compassion for ourselves and each other, for all our humanness during a mass global energy of fear, uncertainty, disconnection and control. Enough division, enough I'm right and you're wrong. That energy is doing no one any good. So let's come together, and for a moment, I'd invite you all just to pause all the outside noise and ask yourself, how do you want to show up for yourself in 2022? More the same, or do you want change? And what energy do you want to bring with you into 2022? So let's, for today, meet where we are all at and start a bigger, inclusive, holistic, useful human conversation. So let's start here. The change starts with us.
Carla, I'm ready to start. That was beautiful. And, you know, you've captured probably in all of what you've said, I really feel it's going to hit every one of our listeners in some way, shape or form. You know, it will highlight something that they've gone through, whether it was one of those points, many of those points. Every one of us have had to experience something. I mean, life is an experience in itself, but the last 2 years have taken its toll in what we have had to confront in life. Things coming to the surface unexpectedly, more so often than less, and things that we just didn't think we would be experiencing or having to face has now become maybe more of a normal thing, or the usual, more habitual, and not allowing us to maybe process what's going on. Life can be happening so much, so fast that we're going from one situation to the next, not even being able to take the step back and go, how do I feel? What are my needs? Does that make sense to me? Do I need help? Can I ask for help? I can. No, I can't. Do you know what I mean? And everyone's probably feeling some sort of way that they're at a loss, or they need some support, or they need to talk, or they need to hear this podcast and this conversation.
Yes. And I think as I'm listening to what you're saying there, people are possibly in survival mode, on some level, and therefore it's really like batten down the hatches and, don't look outside of yourself, and just keep the head down and go along with things. So I know we're very clear that this conversation today, we're not going to get into the outside world picture, where this is really directed at us and what we might be feeling inside here right now, in this time and this experience. And we're really looking today to, start that conversation that might help someone understand where they're at on this particular journey. And we're all going to be in different parts, Steph. And there's quite a bit of comparison with that as well, where people think, I'm worse than them, or, or they're getting it too easy. We want to be inclusive in this conversation. We really want to be inclusive in this conversation. But I really did want to just set that out at the start, where maybe some of the things that are happening, the topics that haven't made a real newsworthy agenda. This is real life. This is happening inside people's homes. This is happening inside people's heads, inside their hearts, So I just think that the conversation will be useful to create awareness, because whenever you can have information given to you in a neutral way, and I hope this conversation comes across as a neutral conversation. We're not looking to cause division or give opinion here. We're just looking to set up a stall where people can have some new information. And the information can help them make an assessment of where they're at. And hopefully then that awareness can help someone then to start to look about how they can maybe change that. Because without awareness and understanding of who you are, you don't know what to change or where to look to create that change, or to even what help to ask for if you were to want to ask for help, So as we've discussed before, podcasts are so useful because not everybody wants to reach out to a coach or go to their doctor or talk to their family. And, our kind of motivation behind doing this is that maybe listening to something might be helpful. And if it helps one person, we've done our job well.
Absolutely. And there's so many things that were bubbling just in my mind as you were talking and just coming to me. I do have some of our followers and listeners interact, and I have done, one-to-one sort of interactions where they're sharing feedback and, and things like that, which is lovely. But they're ready to sort of share certain feedback or say, this topic was really good because I went through this, and they're happy to kind of come forward. Not everyone wants to do that, and some want to keep it to themselves, and that doesn't make them a bad person, because we're all different, we're all unique. And that was what I was saying at the beginning. We're all with different life journeys. We have different lessons in this life and different things that I feel like we've signed up for to experience when we're here on earth. It's one of the ways I see things. And you said it quite rightly, like this comparison as well won't help us. You might, someone might look at me, let me take myself because it's easier than talking about anyone else. Someone might take me and go, why is she so blasé about death? Did you know that I lost my mum 8 years ago and it shattered my life? And it was one of the hardest times of my life. And my whole world ended at that point. But I know that I wouldn't be in this position now of strength, that when death does hit the closest ones around me, I just recently lost my godfather. I was able to handle that news, and he was very dear to me. I was able to handle that news. It was natural death. It was, age and stuff, were conditions, but, not because of what was happening in the last 2 years. It was part of his time, and he lived a long life, but I was able to accept it for what it was. Doesn't mean that I'm not sad about it. But I've gone through a lot to allow me to be able to process this. It doesn't make me ruthless to the fact of what's going on. I've got to a place where there's a knowing in myself that I can process this and I can find solace in a peace with his passing. And I have my own beliefs, and I don't feel I've lost him in any way. It's just I feel that it's a transition of how he shows up in my life as I'm in a physical world and maybe he's in a spiritual. And I just want to share that because someone might look at me and go, oh, she's just cool about it. She seems, but you don't know what's going on behind closed doors, and don't know if Steph's crying and Steph's going through this. And that's the same thing that, someone could be going through a really, really tough time at this point because they've never really had to face death or major family trauma, issues, illnesses until this time, because it's really like had a hit on their family or their close ones. Whereas another person may have had experiences with it, and then later on they've been able to process it. And now through this time, they've got some more resilience. And so my point here is that this is where we can help one another, because there's and then you talk about the mapping, and I want to come on to that in a minute. But when we map, and I'm going to ask you some questions about that, but when we're able to map, it's the awareness, like you said, it's going to give us some clarity of where we're at, and also to look at our support system in that as well. And we can help one another. Just because I went through certain experiences of death and I feel a bit more comfortable in my skin about how I deal with it does not make me any better or less of a person than the next, or you, Carla. But it might mean that I'm the person that could be there of support to you, just saying, if that's something you struggle with. Or, I could be suffering from anxiety to do with remote working or dealing with managing teams and coordination of really difficult work projects, and you are really good at that, or you've overcome things and you're able to just hold space for me as a friend, or as as a collaborator, or even just with the podcast. So I'm just trying to give some tangible analogies that resonate for myself, that I can say authentically on the podcast. But that point, sorry, about comparison, I just feel it's important, and I just had to reinforce it.
Yes, because comparison causes separation, and it causes division.
Yeah.
So and it kind of has this feeling like that we're really separate and should stay separate, But as I was listening to you there, and just to pick up on that, Steph, you were chatting about the death of your mum 8 years ago, and to bring that into, I suppose, where we're at now, like that was a life-changing moment, and I can't put words to that respectfully, around your own experience, but real tough time, and something where your world changed. And for some people, what's going on in their lives now at the minute, it feels like their world has completely changed.
Yes.
And that therefore there has to be, you were chatting about resilience. So those experiences had to give you learning and growth. And that doesn't mean that learning and growth is always positive. You could have been in the trenches before you ever were able to even chat about the learning and growth that you've had, and that's where maybe some people are at the minute, and that they are having an experience right now.
Yeah.
And we want to create awareness of the experience that they're having, so that they can build potentially some learning and growth for themselves, to help themselves through this really difficult, tough time or experience that someone might be having. And just to add in there, I mean, Steph, I know my background, where this time hasn't not touched anyone. Just because I'm a coach does not mean that I haven't had my own challenges, and that I haven't had some triggers and some things along this last couple of years now. Thankfully, because I was on my dark journey about 15 years ago, I have learned, and I have grown, and I have developed a toolkit that has allowed me to keep things like my home noise free from the outside world as much as possible, keep it a sanctuary, or when I am feeling a certain kind of way. I mean, because I had awful anxiety and depression, that thankfully hasn't raised its head at all during this particular lockdown and this particular time. But that is because of me having the experience of having that and then going on a search to self-help, fix it nearly. And that in itself now has put me in a position where I'm sitting in session helping other people. Now, had this have happened at this time that we're living in, and we're purposely not using certain words, Steph, because we agreed we're not using certain language. It's not coming on the podcast, but the listeners know what we're talking about. If this had have been in my life 15 years ago, or 10, 15 years ago, I don't know what shape I would have been in. I do not know where I could have possibly have been, because some of the stuff that's been going on would have really spiked my anxiety, my depression, and all sorts. So I feel really privileged and honoured that I nearly peaked with a really, really tough time years ago. Yeah. And my breakdown of sorts became my breakthrough. And in that now, I'm in a position where I can hold space for people and listen to their conversations and listen to what's happening and be useful, and a listening ear, and offer some information and offer some ways that can support people at this time. So what we're doing now in this conversation is just opening that up a wee bit so that people can hear something for themselves, with the outcome of, let's start here. We have to acknowledge where people are at. We can't gloss over it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's not stay here forever, because you know what? We can't necessarily change the world out there. We can only start down here. It starts with us, as bizarre as that might sound to some people. The change starts inside you. And if we can collectively start, as I said, a useful, inclusive, holistic, and I want to come to holistic as well, Steph, conversation, I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, it totally is. And, we just want to start here because we want to be able to help bring those thoughts and those feelings to the surface for you guys that are listening. If this can be of any use, to say, okay, where am I at and what does this mean to me? Carla, you mentioned everyone's kind of going in survival mode. There's a few things I want to say, and then I've got a lovely question for you. Just burning question. But there's the whole survival mode. The ego steps in when it's survival mode. And everyone knows me. I always talk about the ego, because the ego is probably, if we can't get a good understanding of our ego just rules our world. And that's not the way forward for us. That's not the way to our own inner peace and our own inner contentment. That the ego will go into survival mode.
Can I cut on just 2 seconds? Yeah. Just to add the point that there's a lot of ego trying to control our world right now. Full stop.
Yeah, and that's it. So when you talk about divide and separation, divide and conquer, wars, battles, and I've said this before, they have come because of the ego. Most of a lot of problems in the world have come because their egos battling each other. The ego doesn't seek to find peace. The ego doesn't seek to find consensus. The ego doesn't seek to find collaboration and alignment and harmony. Right? You guys hearing me? The ego seeks to defend or attack, fight or flight. So if you're in this feeling of I'm backed up against the wall, I feel trapped, I don't know how to deal with stuff, your ego is going to act for you guys. And I'm saying this because I'm hoping that I'm going to hit something that might tweak or highlight for any of the listeners. And so what does that mean? Well, you might go to a conversation, or you might interact with individuals, family or work, colleagues, whatever that is in your daily life. And you might be on the defensive. You don't want to open up, but deep down inside, you're really hurting about something. But you need to talk to someone about it, or you need to express it, and you haven't got that outlet, or you haven't found that outlet. So the ego just goes, no. We can't trust anything outside. We just need to defend. We need to defend. Or the alternative is I'm just going to go into attack mode and I'm going to call Carla up. Just example again, Carla, I'll just use us. And I'll just be like, Carla, blah, 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 blah. But really, deep down inside, I'm going, Carla, I just need you to give me a hug. Right? So I'm saying this to you guys because whether you're embodying any of this behavior or you're actually being faced with these type of interactions from your circle, it's definitely coming from that survival situation. And so again, there's also going to be maybe when you're mapping yourself, how does your inner circle look? Because the other thing is that we cannot, allow ourselves. I mean, the most important thing is we cannot take it personal, the behavior of others. But if we're in a very sensitive place and a very sensitive place, we will take it personal. I know I have many a times, someone picks up the phone, calls me, and they've got a bit of an attitude. And then I'm in a pissy mood for the rest of the evening. But why am I in a pissy mood? It was their projection. They're upset. So we have to gain that intelligence, the knowing that it's not us, it's them. They're going through something. Maybe it's that they need us to say, you're right. So how can we start to shift the dynamic? But again, to what you said, Carla, we need to be self-aware. And the more and more we become self-aware, we understand our environment and things start to become much more easier to navigate. And this is what we want to do. We want to be able to try and help this navigation. Let's move. So how are we going to move? Carla, you have this very cool audit, depiction that you use when you're helping to do the mapping in your soul coaching sessions. I was thinking that we could talk through this mapping assessment, and this could probably be an exercise that the listeners can go away and kind of think about after this episode and before the next episode, because we've got more opportunities to do more sort of further assessment, let's say.
Yeah. So I think for the listeners, we'll keep things basic and easy to relate to and understand. And I think that probably the first thing to kind of look at is what makes us human? What is the entirety of who we are? So we are made up of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual parts of us. So I've got a lovely it's a lovely Indian proverb that says everyone is a house with 4 rooms: a physical, a mental, an emotional, and a spiritual. Most of us tend to live in one room most of the time, but unless we go into every room every day, even if only to keep it aired, we are not complete, right? So whenever I'm working with people in here, I would ask them, what's your main room that you kind of live in the most? Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And for most people, it's either kind of physical, mental, but it depends on their journey. I suppose, right? But what's very clear to see is that people don't take a holistic view to their health, their wellness, or their inner balance, right? Or even getting to know themselves. They're not exploring, well, what does spirituality? I mean, it's not religion, or what does my emotional health mean to me? What is it? My emotional health. Sometimes people ask me in here, well, what are you asking me that for? I don't even know what that is. And that's a very, very, very important part. Very important part of who you are. But Steph, back whenever I started my own self-help journey, I was really, really focused on it started with my physical health and well-being, where I was feeling unwell, right? And then I was really focused on my mental room because I had anxiety and depression. So everything that went into that kind of room around understanding, what was going on in my head. But I never once looked in terms of healing myself or getting to a point where I felt complete or that I had moved on fully. I never once looked at my emotional health, and I hadn't a clue what my spiritual health and well-being was.
Yeah.
So for people out there now, I would ask you to take a look and assess where you place most of your focus. So there's a wee bit of a caveat to that at the minute. So if we're tying this into the times that we're in, I'm trying not to use words, lockdown, restrictions, protocols, procedures, what have you. It's very much focused in the physical room, right?
Yeah.
One room, it's looking at an illness and it's looking at the treatment of that illness. Okay. So some of the measures that have been used, in my opinion, right? So I'm very clear, I'm not speaking for everybody here, it's my opinion and it's my truth. And I have observed it. So is that some of the measures that have been used, lockdowns, social distancing, restrictions on being with loved ones at a time of need, they have caused a lot of impact on the mental, emotional, and spiritual health needs of human beings.
Yeah.
For me, that is a prime example of whenever something is focused too much in one space. So the illness is in the physical room, and the treatment is to contain an illness within that physical room.
Yeah.
But we are more than just our physical part. We are physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental. So one part of life is having an impact on the other three parts of who you are as a human being. And those parts are very low on the scale of conversation to be had now. And, I'm hearing nothing but conversations about illness when I do put on the TV and watch the news. Very little about wellness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very little about wellness. And there's a holistic approach to be had to, if anyone is going through difficulty, you have a problem, you could have a problem out here in your physical life and your family, but you also need to look at, what do I think about that? What's in my mental room about that? What am I thinking about this? What's in my spiritual room? What am I believing about this? And what are my emotions around this? Because there can be layers to you problem solving. There's layers to you healing. And there's layers to you feeling whole and complete. It's not just in one area of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, what you've explained there in those four, like almost call it like quadrants. If there is this massive focus towards a physical illness, and it's only being and even the solution to it is being focused there, but there's so much trauma being created, and it's a benevolent, silent trauma. And yes. I feel that everyone in some way is harboring some of this trauma, and therefore any other existing trauma from childhood, any other wounds are being exacerbated in some way because of this. So some might be finding it even harder because those wounds have never really been looked at. Some are looking at wounds and then they've got a little bit more of awareness around it. But definitely if you're not able to process emotions, be an observer, I like to call it like be the observer of your thought patterns. If you can't take a step out of your mind and watch how the mind, the ego, is thinking and behaving, then you almost are just caught into this cyclical way of just allowing things to just happen in the pattern or in a cycle that you've just been accustomed to, and that has now almost expanded to this new kind of dynamic of what's going on in the world, right? And so almost there's a sort of a benevolent submission to that. But we have the power, don't we, Carla?
Yeah.
And we have the power, we have the ability. We can't control what's going on in the world, but we can control what's going on within us, right? And that is powerful.
We can. And I think it's just that first point of making people aware. And I'm not saying that people aren't aware, but there's not everybody that is, because at one point in my journey, I just thought I had my physical body and had thoughts in my head, just to make people aware that there are four parts to who you are as a human being. Okay. And don't get too caught up, just focusing on one area, and just be mindful and create awareness around maybe how some solutions or some ways of being in our life that we're living now, be aware of how they may be impacting you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually too. And just that point that you're making, these elements belong to us. We own and host our physical health. We own and host our mental health. We own and host our emotional and our spiritual health and well-being. It does start inside. Some people feel like it is all out here. Yes, there can be events. Yes, things can happen. But what happens is that there is received inside us. And what is inside us responds to what happens outside of us.
Yeah.
And so forth. But we'll not get too complicated. Not make that too complicated. It's great to kind of have a visual of that, where I often draw out basically like a house, cut it in four, and put physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and put a wee roof on it. And then I write in each room what I do to support my physical health, what I do to support my mental health, my emotional health, and my spiritual health. I mean, if you felt it would be useful to give a few points, I will. Or if you felt we could use that in the next session, I'll be guided by you.
Yeah, I mean, let's do it now, because I think in the next. So I was actually going to say, because I think what we want the listeners to also be able to do is, we've got some very exciting episodes coming up that are going to build on this and build on it in a way where you're owning your energy, owning your power, which is what we're going to talk about in the next episode. And by owning your energy and your power, you are the co-creator of your life. You are able to make that change. And with that, you also work with your own flow, with the universe, and you don't feel victimized by what's happening, because you feel and you reclaim that power that is your divine power from within. And then that allows you to create the changes you want. You may have dreams and goals for this 2022, and you might be facing blocks. You know, I'm trying to manifest, I'm writing down these intentions and blah, blah, blah. That there's lots of things that are happening in those 4 quadrants of the house that are pulling you back into these behaviors or patterns that don't align your energy to be in the best place to co-create. Create the expansion, to make space for the new to come in. So this is the foundational work, what Carla's talking about. And, you know, you can come back and revisit that house many times in your journey, right, Carla? So definitely let's go to it. And I wanted to ask you one thing is, for the listeners, can they put down, like, in those 4 quadrants in the house, what are their challenges? Like, what maybe emotionally, what is it when it comes to emotions? What do they think of? What comes to the surface? Because, you know, many don't want to pick on the guys, sorry, but a lot of guys will say, why are you crying for? That's not good. And crying is seen as a weakness, but it's not, right? If you're understanding and confronting that emotion and releasing it to then process it and move on. So, you know, is that worth also doing, Carla?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great idea, actually, where if you are to draw out for yourself the 4 rooms and label them physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Yeah. And set up one page that has where you feel there needs to be growth, where there's difficulty, where there's limitation, where there's problems, and put it in under each heading. And then what you can do, and I'll give some information on that now, is to look at some of the solutions on another page. Well, how do I address my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health in a way that has meaning for me? Mm-hmm. So in a way, what we're kind of doing is creating your own pathway, your own kind of map to saying, well, where am I to start with? And actually what works for me to help me to get alignment in these areas, and actually what doesn't work for me as well is a very good point, and start to be very honest with yourself and take some of the things out that maybe aren't adding to your alignment and your life. But first things first would be just for you to actually maybe measure where do you put most of your focus? Is most of your focus on your physical health? Is it on your mental health? Is it on your emotional health or your spiritual health? And just grade them 1, 2, 3, and 4. You know, one being your number one, and then a decrease in attention as the list kind of goes down. So one side of that, then you could then be deciding, well, you know, what would I like to change in this area? What do I need to do? So on and so forth, like we have said. But I'll just run through, maybe give people a few pointers and ideas that they can maybe add in to their own assessment of themselves, right? So what we're saying here, as Steph, as whilst we've highlighted that the current times is really focusing on the physical illness solution, and it's causing havoc and mayhem elsewhere, I want to make the point that each one is equally as important as the other. There is no hierarchy. So therefore your attention and your awareness and your focus should be streamlined across them all.
So if it was like 100%, there needs to be 25% focus of your time, effort, energy, intention to each room. As a good standard. And then obviously maybe sometimes people are at a part in their life where maybe they're really, really invested in their spiritual kind of development, or they're really, you know, they're developing themselves emotionally, mentally, or they're training and their physical world's taking over a wee bit more. But it can be flexible. But just to say, I can't, you know, divide it by 4 is a good place to start and put your focus there. So physical. What, you know, here's some of the ways that you can feel happy, healthy, and aligned as a human being and meeting your physical needs, right? Your diet, exercise, nourishing foods, hygiene, vitamins, water, developing a healthy mindset, and actually looking after your mental, emotional, and spiritual health actually benefits your physical health. Now, who would have thought of that? Deary me. Right? Derry me.
Derry me, right? So, who would have thought of that? I mean, you know, when we're looking at high levels of stress at the minute and how that suppresses an immune system, and then we go running to fix the problem without looking at what might have filtered in before that manifested as a physical health problem. We need to back, we need to rewind a wee bit, but that could be that's a whole different session, right? So mental, how to nurture and attend to your mental wellness and that room of your soul. Routine, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty. There can be a lot of uncertainty at the minute, and that's having an impact on people's mental health. So where you can develop your own routine, and that can involve change and adjustment.
Oh, I have something there, because we're in Capricorn season, and Capricorn energy is such a great, and Carla, you're a Capricorn, right? Such a great energy for like structure and creating habits. And it's cardinal energy, meaning, you know, it's a very powerful energy to start a new formulation, a new format. So you could build this diagram of your 4 rooms in the house, and that can be your sort of canvas for the year ahead, rather than going, I'm just going to airy-fairy pick these resolutions out, because I'm not for resolutions. I'm for something that has, so this structure could be, this mapping creates a structure that allows you to have a routine. Brilliant. Love it.
And what it also will do, all of this, is when you put pen to paper, which is a very useful thing to do for yourself, is that you're getting your own menu of what works for you. So you might be reading stuff online, and you might be getting tips online, and you might be reading books or what works for somebody else, and they're telling you what to do. And then you try them, and then they don't work for you, and they fail, and they make you feel worse. Then those aren't your things. So take them off your list. You know, use what works for you, and use what you have right here, right now. We mightn't have access to everything that maybe we have done in the past, but let's be resourceful. Okay. So routine, sleep, your mental health. If your sleep's not good, you know, that affects your mental health. Again, diet and exercise. Like what you said, Steph, talk about your feelings, ask for help, and also rest. Rest has a bad rep. Sometimes it's lazy, or I mean, rest is so important, and whenever if you think you're going about your day, and maybe some people are in survival mode all day and they're running the gauntlet and they're in work and there's loads of different ways of working and people are crab it with each other and biting the head of one another. And biting the head of one another, then you know what? You might need more rest when you come home.
Yeah.
You might need more rest at the weekend. So if you want to sit in your pajamas and take a rest, albeit that that's not going on, it's unhealthy.
Yeah.
Balance is key. Okay. Practice
Can I interject on that one? That one is so underrated, the rest. And, being based in London, and it's much more probably crazier than Derry in some ways, it used to be. It was just it's a rat race, and everyone here just walks fast, moves fast, everything. So when a lot of what's happened is sort of moved and shifted, working from home and stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean everyone's slowed down. They might have had to at the beginning and didn't like it. And then as soon as they kind of got a chance to kind of everyone's like, okay, out, let me just book up my diary. And that necessarily isn't always the fix. It's about finding that balance. Yes, we need a human connection. Yes, it's important to get out there and socialize and stuff, but within reason, because the balance of having time alone, that time with self, will build you up to be the strongest version and the best version of yourself. You cannot be the best version of yourself when you're always out and about giving your energy to situations, peoples and circumstances, right? Like other things and doing. Just, we are human beings. We do need to allow time to just be.
And I think what we could maybe touch on in the next session too is that we were forced to slow down. And for some people, that was a really difficult experience because it pulled a lot of unresolved mental, emotional, spiritual stuff from the background that was in behind the screen of busy life. And therefore people are afraid to rest because what's going to come up or whatever. But we'll just park that bit. But just let's chat about just rest from the point of view of its function, which is to reset and pause. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Practice the pause. Your mental health too. Hobbies, things that interest you. Connecting with others. Yes, we're having to do things differently. Like what would we not do without Zoom now, Steph? But actually, in some ways, it's been beneficial because it's made the world bigger, and in other ways, it's made for some people the world smaller that maybe don't know how to use the technology. So we have to be fair to all. But connecting with others, whether that's lifting the phone, whether that is, sending a message, your mental health, to live in isolation and to be really disconnected, which has been a feature of this time. It's really important that we make a conscious effort to connect with others when that's healthy and that's good for us. All right. Because some disconnect has been good for people during this time too. But again, we would need 3 hours to talk about all that. And again, your mental health. You must look after your physical and your emotional and your spiritual health for your mental health to be good. So you'll see that you need all parts of the quadrant. So from an emotional point of view, again, and that's one of the areas I really specialize in is helping people bring awareness to their emotional needs and their emotional well-being. And I have down here awareness of self-awareness is so important for your emotional health. If you don't know yourself, if you don't know what's wrong with you, if you don't know why you feel certain things, so on and so forth, then you are almost powerless to kind of change it. You need the awareness of yourself, warts and all, to be able to go there and know where to look to fix it. Responsibility too, that you have a responsibility with they have good emotional health. I keep using the word health, but it's the only word I can think of.
Emotional intelligence as well.
I would include that, absolutely. But do you have good just emotional strength, maybe?
Yeah, strength, resilience.
Maybe not health, strength for all of them. that you need to have responsibility, and that means also responsibility to regulate yourself, right? So part of us becoming aware of ourselves and also being aware that everybody's on their own journey should breed some compassion, and it should breed some pause and allow us to be able to kind of collage this journey together without being emotionally triggered by every single person, every single thing around us, right? You know that
Yes.
saying, choose your battles, choose your
Yes.
battles,
Yes.
right?
Oh,
Not everything needs your energy. So for good emotional health, you need to think about that. We don't need to be demanding that I'm right and you're wrong and you can't have
yes.
that opinion. I feel afraid, and what's wrong with you? It's a conspiracy, or it's this, or it's that, or it's the other. You know, you're allowed to feel what you want to feel, and you don't need to constantly be engaging with other people to make them wrong, to make yourself feel right.
Yeah, you don't need to prove yourself or explain yourself. And also I think in that, compassion is a massive high vibrational feeling that we can embody as well and share.
Yeah.
Also being able to just listen without the need to respond. Someone might call you guys and just need to talk. And I know it's in us because, if one of my good friends sends a voice note, then naturally I'll send a voice note back. But sometimes, I've been trying to train myself, and this is where I'm at, is how can I listen more to those around me? Because the more I can do that, the more I'm going to be listened to. We don't necessarily need a response. We just want to be heard. I found out, and I'll share this, that through my childhood, because my parents were still working on, and I love them, but they were just doing the best they could do because they were not so self-aware. They weren't able to hold space to let me be heard. So most of my childhood, I never was heard, right? And goes to show why I was probably screaming to try and get my point across sometimes. Why do you need to scream? You don't need to scream. You don't need to shout. Soft, soft warrior. You don't need to fight for what is yours. You don't need to fight for what is right. It aligns. But it's a training, right? Within healing, we can only heal when we sort of identify with a behavior and then change that behavior or that pattern and keep doing it differently to then instill the new way of doing something. And then we've healed a past behavior pattern or thought, right? So I just wanted to share that because the listening. And so I know you guys are listening to us right now and can't necessarily respond, and this is great, but make sure that you have a support system that allows for you to have a space to be listened to.
Absolutely. And like that connection of being able to reach out and also reach in, and that involves listening and talking, and to be able to understand when it is important to just maybe let somebody speak and listen to them, and also to understand where you don't always have to be the listener and that it's okay. So there's some people out there that pride themselves on being the strong one or saving face, and they feel like they can't speak to anybody else. And you know what? Everybody has got their physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional parts, and there's nobody that doesn't have this inside them as a human being. So please, please don't neglect yourselves, would be my message. And just when you were chatting there, Steph, I was thinking we were kind of saying physical health, and then it was physical strength. I think we should call it physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, and spiritual energy, and what's your input output for that?
I love that.
That's more in line with our kind of language too as well.
Yeah.
So other ways then to work with and supporting your emotional energy in a healthy way would be, stress management. Have a think about what is in your life. People, places, actions, things, whatever's filling up your day that are the source of stress, and how could you maybe manage that a bit better? And again, looking after all the other areas of who you are physically, mentally, and spiritually adds into your emotional health and well-being.
Yeah.
Just finally, then, just really quickly, the spiritual part of who we are as a human being and your spiritual energy, you can source that through things like meditation, practicing gratitude, develop an abundance mindset instead of one of lack. You know, what do we have at our disposal instead of what's been taken away? You know, choice of how you actually want to view your experience. Do you want to view it through the eyes of fear and control and worry? Or do you want to look through the eyes of hope and, you know, belief and trust and faith and healing and awareness and learning? You know, entirely up to each individual. And just other lovely light-hearted ways of connecting with the spirit of who you are inside. Things like music and singing stuff, essential oils, candles, creating a nice high vibe space at home. Like you mentioned, people might be working at home. Like, okay, sometimes that mightn't feel ideal, but make your space as best as you can, because that energy, that environment, you know, impacts your output then. And just finding your purpose and passion. And I'm a big advocate for reading and learning, and especially at this time, being really just a sponge for all types of knowledge. And I'm really objective to hearing it all, as I have to be as a coach as well. But when I have knowledge around me, I can then choose what sits well with my truth. And that helps me to source myself and navigate myself inside these times, which, you know, I've had a positive enough experience to be truthful about it. But that's because of the past being able to show me a way to map myself through these times, you know. And again,
I was going to say that actually knowing yourself and what you said about trust, that trust within yourself then allows you to know what resonates. It's your intuition that you will start to harness more and more. And when you are able to connect with your intuition, you have the right emotional guidance system there. The best of any kind. Nothing can touch it. The best advice, the best navigation, the best calming system, the best de-stressor, the best is your own intuition. And that allows you to also discern, because so much information is flying across the screens. People are saying this, saying that. You have the power within yourself, the ability to discern what resonates with your soul versus what doesn't. And then that's your truth. And no one can't take that from you. And nobody can validate or invalidate you. Only you.
Yes. And that is your sovereignty. Okay. That is your right for you to decide what is your truth. And, you know, you're 100%. We're completely like wading through the toffee of information with very little wisdom, right?
Yeah.
And really, we would be encouraging people now to, you know, filter the information that's around them, the conversations that they're having, the way that they make them feel, the thoughts that they ponder and think about from information presented to them, and just start to tune in and trust your own soul and your own intuition. As you said, Steph, it's just like gold. I mean, it'll never ever fault you to trust your own intuition and wisdom. So we'll just wrap that part up there. I hope that's kind of give people a wee bit of food for thought when they're maybe reflecting on all the parts of who they are, and maybe some of the areas that need a bit of work, and then some of the ways that you might start to invest in your emotional energy, your spiritual energy, your mental energy, and your physical energy, because each one will ultimately support the other.
Yeah, I think that was a great coverage, Carla. So thank you for bringing your assessment of the forums and the house approach, because I think that's a really great starting point. And if you guys learn from the last episode or the first episode of this new year, this is 2022. 22 is a master number. hands on pen to paper is very powerful right now. We're big believers of the journaling anyway.
Yes.
Carla said it, I've said it many times, but there's other things that are really favorably aligning for us. So not just 22 being that master number where you're putting pen to paper will really be powerful. We're in, just to remind you guys, a Venus retrograde in Capricorn, meaning your life in relationships, relationship with yourself first, relationship with those that are nearest and dearest to you, career, finances, all of it. This is a time to evaluate. It's not time to make the decision. Things will be coming to the surface. Your intuition might be buzzing. You might be like, I have this feeling. Just listen. Just create space to listen. Don't have too much noise around you all the time. Use this time for introspection and use that to do the exercise that Carla was just talking us through. That will help you. There'll be some real gems. Imagine pulling that together in this month of January. Powerful time. Forget about making New Year's resolutions. This is the way forward, guys, right? This is what's going to help you then set the intentions to then really manifest the best year ahead for you and create that great year ahead. And also, because I can't help it, there's also the Mercury retrograde that's coming up, and it kicks off on the 13th of January. So it's just underway. So we've been moving from the shadow to Mercury. You might have been finding problems in communication or just things that are like slightly a little bit difficult in Wi-Fi signals that me and Carla had earlier. That's the shadow. But also it's here, it's a gift. And usually the retrograde is again for Mercury. It's a time to don't make big decisions. Don't go just plowing out there. So my point is these first few months of this year are really energetically and astrologically and numerologically, whatever kind of thing, is urging us to really do self-introspection, reflection, evaluation. So take the first quarter, using a business term here, but let's take Jan to March. Let's use this time now. Let's really start mapping ourselves. And in our next episode, we're going to talk about how you really own that energy. And Carla is going to be back to talk about this and what that means about owning our energy and protecting our energy and being doing the best we can for ourselves at this point in time of where we're at in our journey.
Yeah. One of the main things that I share and that I want anyone that ever works with me as their takeaway is to be more aware of how they can take responsibility for the energy that they create and share with the world, right? So that ties in lovely with owning our energy and creating awareness about who you are, what vibe do you bring, but also maybe, the work I do with people is the why. Well, why might I have that vibe? Say it's a lower kind of vibrational or negative vibe, because obviously people do want to raise their vibration. So owning our energy is going to be a great session and around creating awareness around that, and then hopefully some tips for people too, to be able to learn how to protect their energy and also take responsibility for the energy that they share with the world, because it makes a massive difference and a huge ripple effect.
Well, I'm really excited to get into that conversation. So, guys, with that being said, I am truly grateful for you, Carla. Thank you on every level of saying yes to being a resident, saying yes to this episode. I couldn't have thought of a better way to kick off the new year than to have 3. Yes, I said 3. So guys, be prepared. 3 episodes with Carla. So this is the first of a trilogy that we are featuring in this series 5. Make sure you stay tuned. The next one is Own Your Energy. And the one after that is The Universe Has Your Back. So Carla, thank you so very much. And I know you're going to leave us with some words of wisdom and some final thoughts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to say thank you very much, Steph, also for inviting me in to have this conversation as well, because if what we have spoke about can reach anyone and help them, on that very kind of small way, then I am delighted. So to finish up, we had kind of discussed that no matter what is going on around us in the world right now, we have choice about how we respond to that. For some people, they might just think they don't have a choice and it's very automatic, and that might seem like it is, but the reality and the truth is that inside us, inside here, we do have a choice about how we want to respond to what's going on around us.
Yeah.
And there is this lovely parable, this lovely teaching, which I think really it just says this very, very well. So I'll read this out as well. So a Cherokee elder was teaching his grandson about life. I have a fight going on inside me, the old man said, and it's taken place between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The grandfather looked at the grandson and went on. The other embodies positive emotions. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and in every other person too. So the grandson took a moment to reflect on this, and he looked up at his grandfather and asked, "Which wolf will win?" And the grandfather replied, "The one that you feed."
That was beautiful, Carla. Thank you so much for sharing the proverb.
Yeah, it's a good way to, I suppose, paint the picture that we do have choice inside of us, and the wolf that we feed will be the one that grows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's get started with planting these beautiful seeds to grow the right plant, aka the right wolf, in our lives and for 2022. And with that being said, I would like to thank you again, Carla, and our Soul Tribe for being here for the second year in a row for this new series, and for your time, your energy, and your support. Love and light, everyone. Goodbye.